Chiamaka had always been a dreamer, but life in Lagos often had a way of grounding her dreams with its harsh reality. She had grown up in the bustling streets of Mushin, a neighborhood where survival was a daily challenge and hope often felt like a distant luxury. Her father, a local mechanic, and her mother, a small-scale vendor, worked tirelessly to keep the family afloat. They had enough to get by, but not much more. It was a simple, often exhausting existence, but one Chiamaka had grown accustomed to. She had always believed that kindness was a rare gift, something that set people apart in a world so often filled with selfishness. So when Chiamaka would walk through the streets of Lagos, her gaze would often linger on those others chose to ignore. The beggars by the roadside, the children scavenging for scraps, the elderly whose hands trembled as they reached for a coin. In their faces, she saw something that mirrored her own: hope, a yearning for something more, something beyond the struggles of daily life. But it was a rainy afternoon that would change everything for her, a day like any other when she made her way home after a long day of work. Chiamaka had spent hours cleaning a law office, scrubbing floors and dusting desks for a few hundred naira. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pay for the small flat she rented. She was used to the solitude that came with working late, to walking through the wet streets of the city with no one by her side. The rain had poured down relentlessly, drenching her from head to toe, but she didn't mind. It was part of the routine, part of life in Lagos. The city, with all its chaos and noise, never seemed to stop moving. As Chiamaka walked down a narrow alley near her apartment, something unusual caught her eye. A man sat slumped against the wall, his face hidden in his hands, his clothes in tatters. He was surrounded by discarded wrappers, old newspapers, and the remnants of a world that had forgotten him. In the midst of all the discarded trash, the man seemed like just another invisible soul, another casualty of the city's hustle. People walked by, ignoring him, but Chiamaka couldn't. She stopped in her tracks, her heart stirring with a feeling she couldn't explain. She approached the man cautiously. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, unsure if he would even hear her. The man slowly looked up. His face was dirty, his beard unkempt, but there was something in his eyes, something that sparked a memory of lost dignity and forgotten dreams. He was older than she had expected, his features worn, but there was a quiet strength about him. It was as if the weight of life had pressed down on him, yet he hadn't broken. His voice, though rough and weary, carried a quiet gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his eyes softening as he accepted the small coin Chiamaka offered. Chiamaka's heart clenched. She couldn't explain why, but there was something about the man that felt different. In that brief moment of contact, it was as if she had connected with someone who had been lost, someone who, like her, had once had dreams but had somehow found themselves in the dark corners of the world. Without thinking, she helped him sit up and adjusted the torn blanket draped across his shoulders. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the rain-soaked streets, unaware that the man she had just helped was not just any beggar, but a man who would one day change her life forever. Weeks passed after Chiamaka had helped the stranger in the alley, and life in Lagos, with its endless hum of activity, seemed to go on without her. The days blurred into one another, working long hours, dealing with the constant noise, and walking home alone in the same drizzling rain that always soaked her through. Yet the memory of the man she'd helped that day remained with her, a vague but persistent thought that she couldn't quite shake. She had told herself that it was just another act of kindness, another face in the sea of humanity that filled the streets. But there was something about him, something that lingered in her mind long after the encounter, as if their brief exchange meant more than she could understand at the time. Then one crisp morning, everything changed. Chiamaka returned from her usual shift, her hands sore from hours of cleaning at the office, and found an envelope waiting for her in the mail slot. It wasn't unusual to receive mail, but this envelope was different. For one, it was impeccably addressed, the handwriting clean and deliberate, and there was something strangely formal about it. It didn't look like a bill or an advertisement. It looked like an invitation. Curious, she tore open the envelope, her fingers trembling slightly. Inside, there was a gold-embossed invitation card, the words printed in elegant script. You are cordially invited to attend the annual gala of Igbokwe Enterprises. Venue, the Royal Towers, Victoria Island. Date 28th April. Chiamaka blinked, unsure if she was reading it correctly. The name at the bottom of the invitation read, Obinna Igbokwe, the billionaire CEO of Igbokwe Enterprises, a man whose name was synonymous with power, wealth, and influence across the country. She had heard of him only in passing. His company was one of the largest in Lagos, and his business ventures had made him a figurehead of the city's elite. Her first instinct was to toss the invitation aside. After all, she was just a cleaner, nothing special, certainly not someone who belonged in the world of billionaires. But then her gaze drifted back to the name on the card, Obinna Igbokwe. The name stirred something inside her, a strange sense of recognition she couldn't explain. Could it be the same man? Her heart began to race as her mind scrambled for answers. She remembered the way his eyes had looked, soft but full of depth. That man she had helped in the alley had appeared like he was someone with a past, a man who didn't belong on the streets, and yet there he was. Could it really have been him? The question gnawed at her, pulling her in two directions, dismissing the invitation as a mistake or daring to attend to confront the mystery of who he truly was. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the invitation burning a hole in her thoughts. The life she had known felt so far from the world the invitation promised. She had spent so many years living quietly, working without question, never expecting anything extraordinary to happen. And yet, here was this envelope, this chance, a chance that might be connected to the man in the alley. With a mixture of fear and curiosity, Chiamaka made a decision. She would go. She would step into that glittering world, not knowing what awaited her, but desperate to find out, to see if the man who had once been a beggar truly held the key to something more than she had ever imagined. As she walked to the gala that night, she could not have known that the world she was about to enter would change everything, and that the man she was about to meet, if he was indeed the one from the alley, would be the one to transform her life in ways she could never have foreseen. The Royal Towers was nothing like anything Chiamaka had ever seen before. As she approached the venue that night, the grand facade of the hotel loomed before her like something from another world. The massive glass doors shimmered in the night's light, and the polished marble floors inside reflected the opulence that filled the space. A steady hum of conversations mixed with the clinking of champagne glasses as the well-dressed guests flowed through the hall like a river of wealth and status. Chiamaka felt out of place from the moment she stepped inside. She had never belonged in such a world where the richness of the air felt almost tangible, where the power in the room wasn't just in the money, but in the people who owned it. The room was filled with faces that she recognized from the society pages. Celebrities, politicians, business tycoons, all mingling with a grace that Chiamaka had never known. She felt the weight of her simple dress against her skin, how it hung awkwardly next to the designer gowns around her. The harsh, fluorescent lights of the ballroom made her feel exposed, as though everyone around her could see just how misplaced she was. She spotted a few other people from her neighborhood, the working-class folks who had somehow managed to secure an invitation, but they were few and far between. Her presence here felt like a mistake, a mismatch in a world that seemed to hum with perfection and polished smiles. Yet she couldn't leave. The invitation was her only link to understanding the mystery that had already begun to unravel in her mind. "Chiamaka," a voice called, breaking her train of thought. She turned and froze. There, standing in the middle of the room in an expensive black tuxedo that accentuated his tall, commanding presence, was Obinna Igbokwe, the man she had helped months ago in the alley. His face was no longer hidden by grime or tattered clothes. His hair was neatly combed, and his eyes, once dull, now gleamed with a sharp intelligence and calm confidence. He smiled as he approached her, his movements smooth and sure, the crowd parting as though recognizing the man who stood at the pinnacle of success. "Obinna," Chiamaka whispered, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't expected him to look like this. It was almost as though the man she had seen on the street was a distant memory, a different person altogether. Chiamaka, he greeted her warmly, his voice low and smooth. "I'm glad you came. I've been hoping to see you again." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made her heart race. Why would a man like him want to see her again? A simple, working-class woman who had nothing to offer except kindness? The mystery deepened, and as much as she wanted to retreat, to leave this world of luxury that felt suffocating, she found herself drawn to him, to the intrigue that surrounded him. "I didn't expect you to be, well, you," she stammered, her voice trembling despite herself. She didn't know why she was so nervous. It wasn't as if she had any reason to feel inferior, but there was something about him, something powerful, something unexplainable, that unsettled her. He chuckled softly, as though he understood her confusion. "You're not the first to be surprised. I live many lives, Chiamaka. Sometimes the man you meet on the street is not the one you see in these halls, but I wanted you to see me as I truly am." As they continued to speak, Chiamaka realized that everything she thought she knew about Obinna was wrong. The man who had once sat in the alley wasn't some homeless soul lost in the world. He was a man with purpose, with vision, and with secrets. His kindness on that rainy day hadn't been a chance encounter. It had been part of a deeper plan, a way for him to test not just her, but himself. The tension between them built as the night wore on. She couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward him, the connection that seemed to have existed even before their paths had crossed. But every glance, every word exchanged left Chiamaka wondering, what did he truly want from her? Was he a man who could truly be trusted, or was there something more to his story that she was yet to uncover? And as the gala continued around them, Chiamaka couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the precipice of something far larger than she could have imagined, a truth that would soon demand a decision that could change her life forever. The music in the ballroom swirled around Chiamaka, but all she could hear was the steady thumping of her own heartbeat. She couldn't tear her eyes away from Obinna. The man she had once helped, sitting in the rain-soaked alley, now stood before her, a powerful force in the middle of an elite gathering. He had come from a world she could never truly understand, and yet something about him made her feel like she belonged in it. Obinna led her to a quieter part of the ballroom, away from the crowds. There, under the soft golden glow of chandelier lights, they stood facing each other, an unspoken tension hanging in the air between them. "Why did you invite me here, Obinna?" Chiamaka finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She had to know. The weight of the question had been pressing on her ever since she had walked into the grand hall. Why would someone like him, with all his wealth and status, want anything to do with a simple woman like her? Obinna's eyes softened as he studied her face, as though searching for the right words. "You were the first person who treated me like a human being," he said slowly, his voice thick with emotion. "When I sat there on the streets, dirty and forgotten, I felt like I had no place in this world. But then you came. You didn't see me as a beggar. You saw me as me. That was something no one had done for years." Chiamaka felt the air leave her lungs. She had never realized that a simple act of kindness could have such a profound impact. To her, it had been just another moment in the day, helping someone who needed it. But to him, it was a turning point, a shift in his view of the world. As Obinna spoke, Chiamaka began to understand. There was more to this man than the polished CEO persona he portrayed. Beneath the power, the wealth, the expensive suits, there was a man who had been broken by his own life, a man who had used his fortune to shield himself from vulnerability, to shield himself from the world that had left him feeling abandoned. "You don't have to do this, Obinna," Chiamaka said, her voice shaking. "You don't owe me anything. You have your life, your success. Why would you want to pull me into your world?" He shook his head, his gaze intense. "I've built an empire, Chiamaka, but in the process I've lost myself. I've spent so much time trying to protect my reputation, trying to live up to the expectations others have placed on me, that I forgot what it means to truly connect, to truly live. When I saw you that day, I saw someone who wasn't concerned with all of that. You gave me a glimpse of a life outside of this, of what it means to simply be." Chiamaka's heart pounded. She had never imagined that a single act of kindness, a fleeting moment between two strangers, could lead to something so deep. The truth was clear now. Obina wasn't just some wealthy businessman who had seen her as a curiosity. He had been searching for something she could give him, something pure, something real. But as the emotional weight of his words settled on her chest, a new wave of fear crashed over Chiamaka. She had come here seeking answers, and now she had them. But the answers weren't simple. The path ahead was far more complicated than she had ever imagined. What did she want from him? Did she want to be swept into his world of luxury, to lose herself in the glimmer of wealth and power? Or did she want to remain true to herself, to the life she had known, and reject everything he offered? "Obinna," Chiamaka began, her voice wavering, "I don't know if I can be a part of this world. I don't know if I can change who I am. I don't want to be just another part of your world. I want to matter for who I am, not because of what I can give you." The words hung in the air between them, raw and unspoken fears spilling into the open. She hadn't realized it until now, but the conflict wasn't just about him, it was about her. About whether she could ever step out of the life she had built for herself, and if she wanted to, whether she could ever be the woman he seemed to see in her. Obina reached out, his hand brushing hers, a silent promise in his touch. "I'm not asking you to change who you are, Chiamaka. I'm asking you to walk this path with me, to give me a chance to prove that there's more to life than what I've built." For the first time, Chiamaka saw not just the billionaire CEO, but the man who had been vulnerable in the shadows. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. She wasn't sure what the future would hold, but she knew this. She couldn't walk away now, not from him, not from what they shared. The tension between them was palpable, and though the world around them continued, for just a moment, the rest of it faded away. The days following the gala were filled with unease. Chiamaka couldn't shake the weight of her conversation with Obina. Though she had felt a connection, one that was undeniable and rare, her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She had always prided herself on being grounded, on understanding what her life meant, but Obina had turned everything upside down. His world, his power, his wealth. It all seemed like something out of a dream, a fantasy she had no business being a part of. Still, she couldn't stop thinking about him, about the man she had helped on the streets, who had now offered her a life she hadn't imagined. The kindness in his eyes, the sincerity of his words, had touched something inside her. She had tried to resist, tried to remind herself that the life she had known, humble and simple, was the life that had shaped her into who she was. But now she couldn't avoid the nagging question. Could she leave everything behind for a future that wasn't hers? Everything came to a head when Obina called her one afternoon, his voice tense but filled with urgency. "Chiamaka, I need to speak with you. Something has happened," he said, his tone sharp and serious. "Please meet me at my office." She felt her heart race as she agreed, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. She had never seen Obina like this, always composed, always the man in control. But now there was a crack in his perfect armor. When she arrived at his office later that evening, the atmosphere was cold, even for the luxurious space he inhabited. Obina stood by the window, his back to her, staring out over the city. The skyline of Lagos glittered beneath him, a constant reminder of the empire he had built. But tonight, the gleam in his eyes was gone, replaced by a weary exhaustion. "Obina," she asked softly, stepping forward. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Chiamaka, I don't know how to explain this." He paused, as though he was trying to gather the courage to say something he had been dreading. "There's a threat to everything I've built. People I trust, people I thought were loyal to me, are turning against me." Chiamaka's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, who?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and fear evident on his face. "I'm being betrayed by my own people, within my company. I've spent years building this empire, and now it's all falling apart." His voice cracked, the walls he had so carefully built around his emotions beginning to crumble. She stepped closer, not knowing what to say, but feeling the gravity of the moment. Obina, the untouchable billionaire, was vulnerable. He was no longer the man who had stood in the ballroom, exuding power and confidence. He was a man drowning in his own world of deceit and betrayal. "I never wanted you to be part of this, Chiamaka," he continued, his voice quieter now. "I wanted to protect you, but now I realize that I can't keep you away from the storm that's coming. I've made enemies, and those enemies are now coming for everything I've worked for." Chiamaka's mind raced. She had known that Obina's world wasn't as perfect as it appeared, but now the truth was hitting her in full force. The life she had once thought was just a glimpse into something better was now a nightmare of backstabbing, deception, and power struggles, and she was caught in the middle. Her instinct was to run, to leave this world behind and return to the simplicity she had once known. She had been content with her life, with the choices she had made, and now, for the first time, everything felt uncertain. But when she looked at Obina standing there before her, the weight of his pain mirrored her own confusion. He had opened his heart to her, shown her parts of himself no one else had seen, and now he needed her. "Obina, Chiamaka hesitated, her heart torn between the world she had known and the world she could never truly be a part of. "What do you want from me?" Obina's eyes darkened. "I need you to stand with me. I need you to trust me. I need you to believe that I can fix this, but I can't do it alone." For the first time in their relationship, Chiamaka felt the weight of the decision before her. She had to choose between her old life and a future with Obina, a future that promised wealth and power, but came with unimaginable risks. Her heart ached as she faced him, torn between the comfort of the life she had built and the chance at something bigger, something more. But the question remained, could she truly trust him? Could she trust herself? The crisis wasn't just in Obina's company, it was in her own heart. Could she walk into this storm with him, knowing the danger that lay ahead, or would she step back and preserve the life she knew, safe but unfulfilled? The room felt suffocating. The glittering city outside the window seemed like a distant dream, a life that wasn't hers, a world that might soon come crashing down. Chiamaka stood there, heart pounding in her chest, as Obina's words hung in the air between them, thick with the weight of decision. She had never imagined herself in this place. A few months ago, she had been a simple woman, walking home after work, barely scraping by, untouched by the struggles of the wealthy and powerful. Now she stood on the precipice of a life she had only ever dreamed of. But that dream, she realized, was far more complicated than she had ever anticipated. Obina had given her a glimpse of a different life, one filled with possibility, adventure, and the promise of something more. He had shown her his vulnerability, his fears, his heart. And yet, his world, his empire, was teetering on the edge of collapse. People were turning on him, and the man she had grown to care about was caught in the middle of a ruthless game of power and betrayal. Chiamaka's mind raced. She had always known that wealth came with its own set of burdens, but she hadn't understood the full extent of it until now. The more she thought about the life Obina had built, the more she realized how little she knew about the price of success. The lies, the backstabbing, the people who would stop at nothing to bring him down. She had never seen this side of the world before. But it was here, staring her in the face. Obina's eyes were locked on hers, his face a mixture of hope and desperation. "I need you, Chiamaka. I need you to stand with me, to believe in me when the world is falling apart." She looked at him, and for a moment it felt as though the entire world had shrunk down to the space between them. This wasn't just about power or wealth anymore. It was about trust, about love, about a choice that would define her life forever. Could she step into his world, knowing the dangers that lay ahead? Could she put her own life on hold to help him rebuild his empire, knowing she would never be the same person she was before? Or could she turn away, retreat back to the life she had always known, and remain safe but empty, locked in a world of quiet mediocrity? The weight of the decision pressed down on her chest. She thought of her parents, the life they had given her, the simple, steady existence she had always known. It was safe, it was predictable, but it was also limited. There was no thrill in it, no passion, no risk. And then she thought of Obinna, of the man she had helped on that rainy day. He wasn't the same man anymore. He had evolved, changed, and in doing so, he had become someone who needed her, not just for her kindness, but for her belief in him, her willingness to trust him when everything else was falling apart. Chiamaka took a deep breath, feeling a calmness settle over her. She had spent her whole life being cautious, being safe. It had been a good life, but it was small. And Obinna, despite all the danger and uncertainty, represented something larger. He represented a chance at something bigger, something that could stretch her beyond what she thought was possible. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. "I won't run away from this." Obinna's expression softened, relief flooding his face. "You'll stand with me?" Chiamaka nodded. "Yes, we'll face this together. No more running, Obinna, no more hiding." The transformation within her was instant, like a switch had been flipped. She had been afraid of losing herself in a world she didn't understand, but now she realized that this was the moment she had been waiting for. The choice wasn't about wealth, power, or status. It was about what she was willing to risk for love, for connection, for a future that was hers to create. Obinna stepped toward her, his gaze full of admiration and gratitude. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm against hers. In that touch, Chiamaka felt something shift, something profound. She wasn't just helping him, she was helping herself. She was no longer the woman who had walked by the alley that rainy day. She was someone new, someone stronger. Together they would face the storm ahead. And in that moment, Chiamaka knew that no matter what came next, she was ready. She had made her choice, and it was a choice that would forever change the course of her life. The days that followed Chiamaka's decision were not easy. What she had chosen, to stand by Obinna, to step into his world of corporate intrigue and power struggles, was a choice that demanded everything from her. But with each passing day, the weight of her decision lifted. Slowly, she began to feel more at home in the world she had once feared. Obinna, ever the stoic leader, had transformed in front of her eyes. No longer just the billionaire CEO, he became someone she could lean on, someone who depended on her as much as she depended on him. Together, they navigated the storm that had threatened to tear everything apart. Obinna's enemies, the people who had tried to pull him down from within, were exposed. The betrayal ran deep, more than anyone had anticipated, but with Chiamaka's unwavering belief in him and her sharp, intuitive mind, they managed to root out the corruption. Slowly but surely, Obinna's empire began to stabilize. The people who had once conspired against him were either removed or bought out, and the trust he had lost began to rebuild. Through it all, Chiamaka stood by his side. No longer just an outsider, she had found a place in his world. But it wasn't just about power or money. It was about the bond they had formed. The quiet moments they shared when the weight of the world didn't seem so heavy, when they could talk and laugh, when they were just two people, no titles or expectations, just being. There were times when the pressure seemed too much, when the business side of things threatened to tear them apart. But Chiamaka had learned something vital. It wasn't about living in the shadows of Obinna's world, but about creating a new world together, one where they could both thrive. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden light across the city, Obinna and Chiamaka stood side by side on the terrace of his penthouse. The city sprawled beneath them, alive and pulsing with energy. It was a far cry from the narrow, crowded streets of Mushin where Chiamaka had once lived. And yet, standing there, with Obinna by her side, it felt like she had found something more than wealth. She had found a future. Obinna turned to her, his face bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. "You were right," he said, his voice full of quiet admiration. Everything I've built, it's nothing without you." Chiamaka smiled, her eyes softening as she looked at him. "And I've learned something too," she said, her voice steady. "It's not about the empire you build, it's about who you build it with." Obinna reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle but sure. In that moment, the world outside felt insignificant. The challenges they had faced, the betrayals, the uncertainty, it all seemed like a distant memory. What mattered now was the future they would create together. Chiamaka had once feared losing herself in his world, afraid that the man she had fallen for would be swallowed up by the weight of his empire. But now, standing there, she realized that she had not lost herself. She had found something deeper, a purpose, a partnership, a love that wasn't about power or status, but about trust and vulnerability. As Obina leaned in to kiss her, the world seemed to stand still, the weight of their shared struggles and triumphs reflected in the warmth between them. There was no more uncertainty, no more fear. They had found their balance, their place in the world. And in that moment, Chiamaka knew that this was the beginning of something far greater than either of them could have ever imagined. Together, they had built something real, something that went beyond wealth, beyond empire. They had built a future, one where they could stand side by side, strong and unbreakable, no matter what came next. What did you think of the story? We'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback in the comments below. Your reviews mean the world to us and help shape future content. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on our latest stories, exclusive content, and more. Join the community today. Subscribe now and be part of the adventure.